Guys, good Friday morning. My name is Jerry Miller, and welcome to Real Talk, an insider's guide to real estate life in the pursuit of happiness, live on the I Love CVille Network, powered by Sigora Solar, presented by Yes Realty Partners. And check out the screen, the supply chain of everything efficient in real estate in this community. Today's program is going to be absolutely dynamite. I think you're going to get some laughs, some knowledge, some entertainment, some engagement today with a panel of stakeholders and experts. Before we welcome the panel, we'll give props and attention to Judah Wickower. He is our director. He keeps us on point, our North Star here on the I Love CVille Network. And on that note, Judah, if we could go to the foreshot and welcome cast of characters. Keith Smith, Neil Williamson, and Ned Gallaway. Good morning, fellas.
Good morning.
Good morning, all. Good morning, everybody. So this is our coffee with, and today it's coffee with Ned and Neil. We've been trying to put this together for a while, so I'm excited about it. And a shout out to Shenandoah Joe, because without that little extra caffeine, I'd have a hard time keeping up with you two guys. So this is going to be a lot of fun. Have a feeling some of it is going to be at my expense, but that's okay. We love that.
Maybe we get another prop bet going today, Neil?
I'm holding out on the bet that's already on the floor.
Mrs. Smith clearly said, stop it.
You're 0-4 in the Bourbon Trail so far?
0-4 in the Bourbon Trail. And you know what? I happily lose that and hand over a bottle of bourbon. But I don't know. Ned and I, we haven't made a bet, have we?
We haven't made a bet.
Yeah, so there may be a bet somewhere coming in here.
Well, here's your opportunity to get a bottle of.
I like the odds here.
And there's a whole rule about it's got to be a certain value, and you know.
I mean, if you like Buffalo Trace and Top Shelf.
Yeah. And there's a little begging to Mrs. Smith. Please put more money on my debit card. Please put more money on my debit card. So look, let's kick it off, Neil, if you don't mind. We're going to start with Ned. Ned, sure. Please, for the folks that don't know you, introduce yourself, and then you're wearing a little CarLotz shirt. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah,
please.
I appreciate that. So Ned Gallaway, I'm on the Albemarle County Board of Supervisors. I represent the Rio District. And in my day life, I'm the general manager at CarLotz over on Pantops Mountain. We just opened there this past June. And a little different animal than your typical used car retail center. We are a consignment store. So we do two things for two different crowds. So for our folks that are looking to purchase a car, you can get more car for your money because the way we do our pricing strategy is below the average retail. So if you're on the look for a good car, want to have a good time, one of our core concepts is have some fun. It's a different environment while you're car shopping. It doesn't have to be what some people make car shopping out to be. So we have a good team. They're not commissioned, so you come on over. We have a good time. If the car works for you, we help you secure it. If it doesn't, then we hope you enjoy your time with us. On the other side, we help sellers consign their cars with us. So if you are somebody that are looking to maybe get a new car and you don't like the trade value, or you have an extra car you need to get rid of, or you're a business and you're getting ready to renew the fleet and need to do something with the old fleet, we add an alternative for you other than just being able to go in and trade in and get wholesale. So whether you go trade a car in or sell it direct to a dealership or an entity, you're only getting wholesale numbers. You bring the car to us. You still have to invest a little bit into it to make sure it meets inspection. It's a quality car, but then you pay us a fee. We'll sell the car for you, and you usually make a couple grand more than what you can on trade. And then you don't have to sell it privately to get that extra money. We'll do that for you. You don't have to have all the people come into your house and doing the test drives and whatnot. So the consignment model just gives sellers an extra avenue to, like I said, if it's just folks like me and you, is to get rid of that car, get more money out of our car right now, even more than the wholesale, which is even higher, which we may end up talking about at some point today, the value of cars. But like I said, if you're a business and you need to move that fleet and your only option is to wholesale, bring those over, talk to us. We can talk about what we can do for our CarLotz for Business platform and help local businesses get some more money for their cars as well. Free consults, takes 10-15 minutes, not a lot. Come meet the team, say hi. Happy to explain the whole process to folks, and if you're in the market, come on over and meet the team, and they'll gladly show you the inventory.
I can testify a little bit. I've referred a few folks to you, and everybody on the buy side anyway, not the sell side, and every one of them said they got more car for the money than they thought they would. So.
And it's, we've got good inventory right now. Inventory's been a problem in a lot of areas, not just the car world. But
really?
But we are sitting on inventory. So we do have selection. We got small cars and medium cars and trucks and all of that. So I think you'll find
a couple of Teslas on the lot the other day.
A couple Teslas are there finally. That was nice to see. local folks are starting to find us. We get more buyers, obviously, that come in the door every day than sellers, but the sellers are starting to come out and find us as well. It's like, all right, yeah, this is a way I can go, and even though my car value's up, the consignment lets you even take it to the next step and get more out of it.
So at the core, this is a real estate show, and we'll weave in how more similar your industry and our industry is. But Neil, I think there might be one person out here that does not know you. Would you please?
That lucky on person. TV, NBC 29's Neil Williamson.
I'm Neil Williamson. I serve as the president and executive director of the Free Enterprise Forum. We're a privately funded, send money, public policy organization focused on local governments in Central Virginia. We have a blog called, you can go to freeenterpriseforum.org. You'll be redirected to the WordPress site. And we track what local governments do. And the great powers of local government is really in land use and how that is taxed, how that is managed. And so a lot of our work is in the land use sector. The land use impacts economics, so you'll see a lot of economic data, a lot of theory with regard to what economic concepts work, which economic concepts have historically failed, and some of the questions about housing affordability and affordable housing, which are two different topics, and how sometimes when you think you're creating more affordable housing, you're actually making the majority of housing less affordable. And we can probably get into that today.
I'm pretty sure that's going to pop up on the conversation. So please donate. If you do, you get a nice little handwritten letter. So thank you. I received that.
You do that.
Everybody that donates gets a letter.
And I like the connection, because if you come to CarLotz, you either save money through the buy, you can save that saved money can go to Neil, or if you sell with us, you can make a little extra.
Yeah,
that can go to
I'm
Neil.
just really happy that Ned's plugging into the Tesla market.
Oh, did you just say plugging in? Oh, jeez. Oh, good Lord.
I love his humor. Yeah. I really do. It's clever.
To make it even worse, when Mrs. Smith gave me all this stuff to give to, and we got the letters, she goes, well, hold it. We're donating, and plus you're losing all these bets to Neil.
One bet. You've lost one
well,
bet.
I'm probably going to lose the second one, but
I didn't make the bet with you. Made the bet. Yeah, I didn't volunteer that.
Yes, dear.
And Sean Tubbs watching the show, he goes, "Let's get to the content slinging." Sean Tubbs, we love you, Sean Tubbs.
So where do we want to start, guys? This is all Albemarle, all the time. I know we can start tackling the 6 or 7 districts, whatever you guys want to start with. Let's go have some fun.
Sure. Well, we talked last time when I was here. We talked about the idea of a 7th supervisor, and a relatively large organization here in town, the Charlottesville Area Association of Realtors, which represents over 1,000 members, wrote a letter to the Board of Supervisors indicating their preference for a 7th supervisor. The board chose, in their wisdom, not to do that at this time. And I'm sure that Ned has strong opinions or views about what direction that was and what was said from the dais from a variety of different supervisors regarding increased representation on the board and perhaps how odd numbers work versus even numbers.
Maybe before you kick off, from your perspective, why do you feel 7 is better than 6?
The Free Enterprise Forum believes 7 is better than 6 simply because we believe that an odd number generally will generate more progressive actions and will generally generate a stronger opinion, whereby the even number means you have to get 4 votes out of 6 in order for anything to get done. What that means is if you have half of the board in approval of your proposal, and the other half opposed, nothing happens. And oftentimes when government does nothing, it's a good thing. And I heard that from some of our supporters. But I firmly believe that an odd number creates organizational dynamics that are stronger than an even number.
Ned, jump in.
Well, I mean, what I said that evening was, we're not diving into this conversation right now. We did it. We said that the timing, the action we took was to expedite the schedule. It didn't seem like there was an appetite to have the conversation right now. I'm certainly open to having the conversation. I said as much that evening, that if we wanted, and even threw out there the maybe tie in for the whole salary conversation because of the way that process goes. So you could maybe have, all right, let's talk about having a 7th, and then if the board chose they wanted to go that route, then we could also maybe tie in if we want to start increasing pay for supervisors. And Right now it's a part-time position, but and I don't need to go down that rabbit hole, but that's another thing that has been talked about maybe every year or two when sometimes salary increases come up. The thing I didn't know about this conversation until the meeting was that if you did a 7th supervisor in the at-large, the state would require that to be your chair. I didn't know that.
Well, that's based, to be clear, that is not the case for all localities. That is the case for Albemarle and I think it's Prince William, both who operate under a county executive form of government. There are different rules for that. So, for instance, your mutual friend, Dale Herring, is an at-large supervisor in Greene County, but they work under a county administrator form of government. So, this is way deep in the weeds, but if you have a county executive form of government, as Albemarle does, you would have the person elected at large be the chair.
It's also important to emphasize that the chair does not have any different power than the other supervisors. Yeah. Outside of the chair sets the agenda?
The chair works on the agenda with the whole team. Okay. So it's not like when I was the chair, I'd walk in and go, next Wednesday we're doing X, Y, and Z. There are things that fall on the agenda. The chair and the vice chair, it's really about the management of the meeting. So when you see an agenda and you're pushing things together, make sure that you follow along, that the things the board wants on the agenda is there. Make sure you're doing the follow-up with the staff to make sure that's there. But then it's looking at something and go, okay, we've scheduled 30 minutes for this topic. The board's going to take off on that. We need to schedule at least 60 minutes for that, and that's what you do to construct it. And then the chair runs the meeting. So, it would seem, I don't understand why for the county executive form of government that stipulation is there, because it essentially politicizes in a campaign somebody running for the at-large to be chair for a position that
has
really
no power.
has no extra power or authority, nor should be politicized.
Sure.
Because
you're talking
it's about
perception there.
It's effectively running a meeting. So if you ran, I could imagine myself running at large and saying, well, I'll be the chair of the board. I couldn't say one thing that I'm going to do as chair that I wouldn't be able to do without the rest of the board to go around. So that just seems like a weird thing.
So thank you for your service as on the Board of Supervisors and recently as the chair of it. As you know, I chair a couple of organizations. A couple of them are public. It's amazing just to get out there how much we really don't have any power as a chair. All we really do, and you'll chime in on this a little bit, Neil, but what you really do is what Ned is saying is you just manage the meeting, right? We can't just say we're going to talk about X, Y, and Z. It comes down from staff, and it's a very it doesn't have as much power as one thinks.
And there's behind the scenes stuff. I mean, just from sheer order of operations, the board trusts whoever the chair and the vice chair is to handle certain things. So the county executive oftentimes will check in with the chair and to do some notification, and then the chair has some responsibilities for that. So, I mean, there are things that you need to do, but it's more management type stuff. It's not politicized.
And Neil is a parliamentarian, so he knows this better than anybody. But the chair herself can't make a motion, right? Basically, you're just there to manage the meeting as a regular member of a board. You actually have a little bit of control of at least making motions and trying to move decisions along. Am I on the right track, Neil?
Dependent upon which Robert's Rules of Order you're using, small group rules of order allow the chair to make motions.
Sure.
And everyone says they're Bobby's Rules of Guidelines or whatever. But I have to give a little bit of props, although I'm remiss in doing so. When we pivoted, Jerry's favorite word, to online meetings, I was not exactly certain how the conversations would go. And Mr. Gallaway, as chair, created an environment with help of others, I'm sure, but that was that made the online meeting work and made certain that all supervisors were heard and that the public was heard in turn, even when the public's mic had an issue. I thought that was not an easy pivot to make and was done well.
Our one resident with the squeaky voice every time we'd have to get it turned over. Now, I will say this about the at-large position. Now, forget the chair comment for a minute, because you're talking, I was previously the at-large member of the school board. And I'll tell you what I like about the at-large position, at least what I said when I was the at-large member of the school board, is I got to go around the whole county and speak to residents and say, you really have two representatives representing you. you have your district-specific supervisor or school board member, and you have me, the at-large person, so that if you, for whatever reason, get unhappy with one, you always have the other. Not that they can't go to the whole board, but to have that person that's going to come in and go, I'm going to look at your specific issue and feel the responsibility for that. Like the last time I was here, we talked about being responsible to your district and the people.
Well, I
that
was
live
just
in
going to
your
bring that
district.
up. But
So the at-large member can do that as well and say, yeah, I can be here to represent, and that a resident now has two voices that they can legitimately talk to.
So to be clear, the Planning Commission has an at-large member. The school board has an at-large member. The Board of Supervisors doesn't have an at-large member. Is that incongruent to anyone else?
Well, I mean, I've always been curious about it when, but it's how they set it up, and you know how things go. Unless there's the willpower to change something,
so,
it's going to
so
stay
Neil, is
as
that
it
an
is.
actual baked into the state side of things,
Nope.
or this is internal? So the
Each locality has the ability to do so, and in fact, I had a fascinating conversation with Supervisor McKeel with regard to the goals of adding the at-large position to the school board.
Yeah.
And one of the goals was to increase the potential for diversity. And that certainly was one of the goals in having 7 supervisors. That doesn't absolutely happen. The opportunity is there, but it doesn't mean you're going to get diversity.
Well, you don't take a stance. So you've done the pro stance of the 7th at
Oh,
large.
I do take a stance.
Okay, so you're pro.
I am absolutely pro.
Okay, so then offer the other side.
The-
The legitimate argument for the other side of not doing this.
The legitimate argument for the other side, one supervisor, who shall remain nameless, told me that it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Okay, so you're saying it's not a legitimate argument.
I don't think that particular argument is a legitimate argument.
Is there a legitimate argument?
Considering that every other advisory board has an at-large, no, I don't believe there is.
But is the count extra, or is it the same? In other words, is it 6 or is it 7? Is
It's
it odd?
7.
So it is not an even number. It is
Yes.
an odd number.
Well, the interesting part's the vote, that when you think of the vote count, because you're right, when you have 6, you have to get to 4 to get a yes. You only have to get to 3 to get a no. And I mean, if you're going in and you're trying to persuade a certain way, the hurdle is higher to get the yes moving forward. Some people believe that because of that, for the change or for the approval, whatever the right word is there, that getting that 4th person to come along and say yes means that it's scrutinized at some different or more rigorous level to get to that extra vote. And
I think that's
but
fair.
It is. I think
But-
it's fair, but it's also, like I said, when I go in, maybe I'm a 1 or a 2 on a 6-person vote, that whether that's a yes or a no, and I need to persuade colleagues to come along. If I want this motion to not proceed, and I know I have one other person in agreement with me, now I only have to persuade one more to stop something. So that burden is higher. So you could make the alternative case for the 7 is, all right, let's even this up and say that the burden's the same whether you're trying to get to yes or no. You got to get that 4th vote.
Well, again, I'm just an little old Marine, so to me the count's the same, right? You got to get the 4 if it's 6. You got to get the 4 if it's 7. And you and I've spoken about this many times. Ned, I've never been in favor of even boards, and it's just it just makes the negative side of any topic. It gives them, in my opinion, an unfair advantage of that extra vote that they have, whereas you're at 7, to me, and I've been doing this for 35 years, been working with boards for 35 years, it always seems to be harder to get something voted in yes if I got 7 or if I got 5 than I have even. It's just, to me, it's just always harder. It's harder work.
But to be clear, I think Ned's point with regard to the regulations that are set forth under the executive form of government is a good place to start the change. It would be I don't think it would be a heavy lift, because I think it's only 2, it may be 3 localities that are under the executive form of government, but allow it to be permissive, whereby they could choose to whether or not that elected at large would be a absolute chair or a standard supervisor.
So let's say this gains momentum. What is the likelihood, or what's the timeline of a 7th being reality?
Well, it won't be anytime soon. Right now, the county has presented 3 new maps, all of which contain 6 supervisors for the public to choose from regarding the redistricting. The CAR had asked that one map be 7 so you could have an accurate a discussion about it. CAR was not persuasive in that. It will not be this year. It will not be for the next election. But if you wanted to make that moving for the following election, you would need to get legislative action occurring in the next 24 months.
Yeah, so it doesn't have to just be on a 10-year, we can do this anytime, basically.
Yes.
And we'd have to have that conversation. Now, I didn't mean this to be flip at the meeting, but I said, this topic seems to come up every couple of years or every 4 or 5 years, but it is not one, when I'm talking to constituents or I look at my list of topics, that is at the top in terms of high priority for my voters. It's just the fact. When I talk to folks, they're talking about the development applications that are out there. They're talking, like right now, we're talking about, the budget's coming up, so tax rate's going to be a big deal. Things like that are going to be a big deal. So but the board can only get to certain things, and when you're hearing certain things from your public, that can sometimes help drive the priority of it. And if you don't have supervisors who are maybe not excited about the topic, or maybe indifferent is the better word.
Or maybe they just have too much on their plate.
Well,
and
but they need pushed. You need a little push to get that going.
So you need a push in order to be able to give up some of the power.
You need a push to be able to have the conversation of a topic, no matter the topic.
Well, and we know why CAR, and we love CAR. We work with a lot of the folks in CAR.
In full disclosure, I'm a board member.
Yeah, we love CAR. We love CAR. We know why CAR's pushing this. A lot of the ties have led to less inventory in the market.
Yeah.
I mean, cut to the chase, right?
But if you're voters out there living in the community and you hear the burden's higher to get to yes than a no, and what's happening in most of these applications, are these folks coming out and rawing the support of rezonings and upzonings?
Well, that's
Or are they, and so that's why, again, the question becomes one of, where are the new, who would be the new residents, how are they represented in those conversations? And as you look toward your comprehensive plan, which was a clever little diversion rather, your comprehensive plan.
It's called a segue.
It's called a segue.
It's called a segue.
When you say new residents, you're talking about the folks that would live in the new units?
Right.
A divot's a golf thing.
I obviously haven't played in a while. The bottom line is that I think getting to 7, having 7 would be a better representation, because you would have that many more views, that many more perspectives. One of the things that I push back on, and I have, I think, in comments to Jerry's show, is that while we are omni-party on both the city and the county, there is a plethora of different perspectives on those dioceses. So I think that having a 7th would help, because right now, based upon Sean Content, Slinger, and Williamson, we have the real reality that you're running out of space in the development area, and you're going to need to grow the development area. When are you going to have that conversation?
Good points right there. Very good points right there. I mean, I think you could say, Keith, going to you here, I think you could say if a 7th becomes a reality, which you've made it clear it's not going to be anytime soon, we would have potentially more progress, more inventory in the market, and perhaps...
No, not necessarily. Right? No, because the effort to get to yes is exactly the same. And that's kind of the counter argument, right? The people that, if we are looking at a project to get approved, and if we're at 6 right now, I have to get to 4 to get a yes. If I'm at 7, I have to get.
But the 7th could have more of a, how can I put this? The individual supervisors are, choosing my words carefully here, are showing in some ways that they're prioritizing district over county in totality, where the 7th can do the county in totality over district.
Well, that was what Ned was explaining.
If they're an at-large, if it's a 7th supervisor and you create a 7th magisterial district, then it's just it's a
so
different...
CAR is saying, give me 7 districts.
No, CAR has made it clear they wanted 7 supervisors. They did not speak with regard to at-large or district.
Yeah.
Correct, but I think we also talked about adding a 7th physical district. Is that not correct?
Well, that was an option, he said.
That was an option. Got it. So, as one who has done this for quite a while, it seems to always be just a focus on land use. When there is an an odd number, 5 or 7 or whatever it is, the project always ends up better. There's more engagement, there's more conversation in it. When there is only 6, and I'll speak to my home county, right? They kept it at 5 instead of 6. But when for decades, and Neil will echo this does not just only affect subdivisions. It took us 30 years to get Water Designs Crossroads because there were 6 members, right? And because there was 3 that wanted it no, 3 that wanted it yes, it stayed no. And it took us 30 some odd years to get water there.
And turn that over to another locality that has an odd number, and Gary O'Connell's time in the city of Charlottesville. Every time there was a decision about what was then known as the Meadow Creek Parkway, including what color paint to use, it went to city council for a vote, and every vote was 3-2. If that had been an even number board, it could have been 3-3, and that would have been a no.
So I'm going to change gears a little bit, guys. You want to chime in on
No, I was
that?
just going to say, so being one of the supervisors on a 6-member board, knowing that I have to get to 4, it's like, I hate to put it this way, but you know the rules of the game.
Sure.
So then you operate accordingly to get there to, one, either represent what you represent or to achieve what you think is best for the county. So the mechanics of getting that done, while it can be not complicated, what can be frustrating for those who come before us, there are some that just firmly believe that, yeah, it should be an extra burden to climb to get to that yes, no.
Understood.
Yeah, and I think we're all going to agree to disagree on this conversation, but from my perspective, I still got to get to 4.
Yeah.
I'm either doing 4 at 6, I'm doing 4 at 7.
Right.
I still need to get to 4.
And I don't think the board's afraid to have the conversation. It's just a matter of where does the conversation happen relative to the other working things that the board wants to work on. And that's going to take 4 people.
There's not an advocate on the board to go to an odd number.
Yeah, and I want to give Ned an opportunity to ask Neil a question, because Neil's been on the show a bunch of times. We haven't coordinated. I know there's a couple of questions that you want to bring up and maybe chat about Neil with, but why this 6 and 7 is so important. This is a real estate show. Inventory is just non-existent. I just ran some quick numbers in Albemarle County this morning. Just a new construction, just to focus on that on attached. The median sales price for the last 13 months was $370,000. It's just a lack of inventory, and at some point we'll talk about some magic we did with the land trust to do something for a fraction of that price. So I know you've been wanting to chat with Neil. You want to throw a question?
I don't know if I have any questions, but I will follow up on one thing, because one of the questions was, well, where there's new people that aren't here yet, who's representing them? Well, okay, that's an interesting concept, but if you take past experience, maybe I'll get myself into trouble saying this stuff out loud, but what would new
Welcome to
people
the
who
club. I
don't
do
live
that
there
regularly.
say? So in my area, the Rio District, specifically where Parkway Place is, 10 years ago, Dunlora Forest didn't exist. So some might say back then, what would those people that want to live in Dunlora Forest say if they were here and you were giving voice to them? Well, we know now, because Parkway Place happened, and I've heard from Dunlora Forest, and they sounded a lot like the folks that lived there prior to Dunlora Forest coming in. The same can be said of the folks that live over in Belvedere Reserve, that are living in Belvedere, and the lofts at Meadow Creek, and all those units that come up. So at some point, the folks that are going to arrive, and I made this point during the first, when the Wetzel property came to us beforehand. It's like new people that are going to get here if the infrastructure doesn't work, and there's problems because of how much density we've jammed in this area, and the traffic and the roads haven't caught up with it. I know exactly what they're going to say. These impacts are not bearable. What are you going to do to fix those impacts? So there is some theorizing you can do to go, well, I think I know what the new folks might start to say.
So the question becomes one of, if you have a community vetted, voted upon comprehensive plan
Well, that's what I was
that says 4 to 6 units an acre on the east side of the county, and a proposal comes forward that's 4 to 6 units an acre, yet neighbors oppose, what happens?
Yeah, you have to work through it.
He always does this on the show over here. He knows where I live over there. And we have them watching on the program right now, including one of the people on the association that I live in the neighborhood I live on. If that particular Breezy Hill project was a good one, but the residents of the neighborhood right next to it, all they said was the infrastructure should be in place to accommodate the density that they were trying to pursue.
And
So I don't think they were opposed to that.
Well, and in fact, to the credit of those residents, when the master plan was completed for that area, they got that language put into the master plan, and there was only one person who spoke against that language being put into the master plan, and he's sitting at this table. And by the way, that language is illegal to be in the master plan.
How so?
You cannot preclude development in your development area on off-site improvements that the developer does not control.
Then why did, and I'm curious for Supervisor Gallaway, why did your colleagues at the time also not bring this point up to the same tune you did?
I don't know. They were, back then, I would imagine they were in agreement with the folks that created the master plan.
The reality was the neighbors carried the day.
But I mean, I spoke to that when that was in front of us. That was like, well, that's an impossibility. So we're not going to just remove that factor.
It is the challenge is, when we look holistically at a comprehensive plan, and we're now looking at 2044, guys, is the end of the next comprehensive plan. And based on our numbers, which are based on the county's numbers, you run out of units in the development area in 2044, or if you end up getting high density, it may stretch to 2047.
Then throw this to you. RST, 29 North, Forest Lakes vehement, and Hollymead vehement opposition to that development. All that's fair. What was the difference with their charge and what Glenmore did with Breezy Hill? Same level of organization.
So try the question different. You want to know why that was more successful than Breezy Hill?
Yeah.
Is that the question you're asking? Okay.
Well,
I would think that's a good question for Ned.
Well, I think RST, I mean, they're vastly different local specific circumstances. I mean, RST is right on a throughway that has had major investment and should be able to support the traffic concerns.
So Ned, I'm going to pause you for a moment. There's a lot of folks that are from not this area listening to this, so let's just do a
And
quick...
media.
So
and
RST
media.
is up 29 North in the like Hollymead Town Center area.
Correct. So
and
this
then Breezy Hill's out 250 going
Correct. So
250
two different portions of the
portions
county.
of the county.
Both in the development areas.
Both
And
in
they're both in the
area.
development area. Now, to be fair, the Breezy Hill one was more, you wouldn't say the RST property was a transitional property from one type of neighborhood or zoning into another. And Breezy Hill did have that. So, like, part of the conundrum or the question became, like for me, I was very specific the first time that came around that R4 was an acceptable 4 acres a unit transition from what was existing on one side to what was existing on the other. And there were people that didn't agree with that felt R2 was even too dense of a transition zone. But that's different.
And let me wrap this up just a little bit, in so much as in the past, back in the dark ages when I was still doing this job, and we went through what was known as DISC, Development Initiative Steering Committee, and DISC 2, also known as Son of DISC. They came up with the neighborhood model. They had 12 principles of the neighborhood model. One of those 12 principles was a hard stop of development, whereby you would have full development to the development area line, and then you'd have a farm. That was the concept. If you think of Rio Road, that's the best one that you can come up with. Rio Road, West Rio Road, on the right side as you're headed out, you see farmland, and you see some churches, and you've got, right before you get to the Albemarle High School complex, and on the left side, you've got trailer parks and townhouses. That was the vision. That vision has changed. It hasn't been changed in the comp plan, but that vision has changed to, we want to transition. Well, when you transition, you lower the density on the edges. When you lower the density on the edges, you lower the development area capacity again, and you only shrink the development area.
Yeah.
So let's pivot a little bit to real world. and what's happening out on the ground in the world that I live in every day, the world that the listeners and the viewers live in every day. So if you're trying to buy a home right now in Albemarle County, you know, if you are looking for an attached product, I'm going to pivot to a little bit what Neil helped us with, what Neil and Ned has helped us with, and what this studio has helped us with, the land trust, to produce some units at the right price, because everybody in this room helped us get there. But you can't buy an existing attached home for under $315,000. Oh, by the way, there's only 8 of them available in the whole county. New construction's much higher than it's 740, and oh, by the way, there's only eight of them. So and forget about Breezy Hill, let's call it Fulvana County, whatever it was. The fact that went by right, that just took out the people that are trying to serve us, the workforce housing, the affordable housing, they are now out. They're going to my county. They're going to Buckingham County. And, you know, I'm just going to give a little shout out to the land trust and all this stuff. We just put on and I'm super excited about it. I just put under contract our 9th unit at Spring Hill Village for $243,000. We will close in 8 months, 9 permanent affordable houses. So, you know, the problem with Breezy Hill or XYZ or whatever, if they go by right, these, and oh, by the way, the medium area income for the average on those on those 9 units is 50%. Somewhere around 40 grand of a family income. These people are now going all the way down. So what, you know, if we really want to try to help this, we got to figure out a way to get these projects approved.
Right, and I think this dovetails with the efforts that the board has been doing with Housing Albemarle. They're going to have a presentation this coming Wednesday of the developer incentives. Those lots don't happen without an affordable housing policy that mandates 15% of the units available had to be affordable. And those were proffered lots.
These are proffered units. I just want to say something out to everybody on this, because Jerry and I have this debate all the time. Is there really a fix for affordable housing? I happen to think there is, but I'm a little jaded because I chair one of them. You're
optimistic because you chair one of them.
Correct.
Or Pollyannish.
Or hopeful, some would say.
But we got it to work. For $180,000, we put 9 families in permanent affordable housing. This wasn't $2 million. This wasn't $30 million. $180,000 produced $2 million worth of that's permanent affordable. And that 180 will always, it'll never go any more than that. That 180 will produce home after
And where did
home.
that 180 come from?
Came from me from a come on, what did we do for 12 hours?
The telethon.
Telethon, knocking on doors.
And where did the land come from?
Stanley Martin. So I cut a deal with Stanley Martin to do that.
Just want to make sure that, and Stanley Martin, in order to conduct their business of Spring Hill Village, needed to have affordable units.
In order for that work, it required Ned, it required Jerry, it required Susan Steinmart, it required Stanley Martin. But we put everybody at the table, and for a freaking 180 grand, we put 9 families in it that are going to stay forever affordable. Oh, by the way, I need 240,000 more.
I knew that
so I could do 12 more.
That's what I love about you. He's never afraid to make the ask right there. Scott,
240
here. Okay. So the Breezy Hill topic is got traction here. The perception, this is a very interesting position for me. The perception is that a resource neighborhood was able to change policy at a different rate than a neighborhood that was not as resourced. And there was also concern that a local developer in southern Charlie and Frank were not as prioritized as an out-of-market developer in RST. Where's RST from?
Virginia Beach.
Virginia Beach. So that comparison with the circumstances with Breezy Hill and RST, I think, is a fair one.
I think there's always the idea that those differences may not be causality.
What does that mean?
That means that Those differences exist, but they may not be the reason. There are other differences that may carry stronger weight.
Gentlemen, we're talking apples and pears here, right? They're all fruits. RST is a very different project. It was a multi-family, multi-story project. The original Breezy Hill was all SFD, single-family detached. It is two very different worlds.
Well, I didn't get to vote on either of those projects. I'd love to hear what Ned had to say about those.
Well, I mean, you don't, whether the developer is local or out of town, we look at the impacts of what the development's going to do. And whether they're out of town or local, that doesn't change those impacts. So that doesn't enter into my thought process. Oh, this person's here or there. Maybe it should, maybe people think it should, but honestly for me it doesn't. So when I sit there and go, okay, I've got a local developer, I've got an out-of-town developer, you kind of note that, but you get into the nuts and bolts of, all right, what's this going to do to the roads? What's this going to do to the schools? What's our green space? You start diving through the application in all the ways that we do. I don't approach an application any differently.
Do your peers?
No, I think we all attack it from that same standpoint. Now, you probably have more time invested if it's in your district, because you will spend some extra time with planning staff getting in and knowing the nuts and the bolts of stuff. So like, for example, I might go tour something or meet with staff extra couple times to get all my questions down, because I'll be involved with more community meetings, et cetera, than maybe one that's in the Scottsville district.
So how much weight does a supervisor's view of a project in their district carry in an even-numbered board?
Well, it's one vote.
But how about influence behind the scenes, I think is what he's alluding to. Is that what you're alluding to?
I don't think it has to do with the number of people. I think it has to do with the skill of that supervisor to persuade others.
Okay.
I'm just raising, I'm
That's a good
curious
response.
in so much as I've seen a number of votes in the last 10 years where a project within a supervisor's district has been approved and the supervisor of that district may have voted against it.
Sure. And that just happened with me, right, in the Rio district for the point,
Royal Point.
Rio Point. But, that's, when that project first came to us as Parkway Place, I was surprised when I left that evening that it went 3-3. I thought it was my reading of knowing supervisors and how they talk and consider things, I thought I was going to leave there with a 4-2 approval on Parkway Place. And we left with a 3-3 split.
So for those who have never attended a meeting like that, how did that process go? Did that change in the middle of the discussion of the meeting?
Every supervisor can be a little different in how they go about doing things. I'm not particularly one that's going to go work other supervisors behind the scenes. I'm going to lay my case out. I spent a lot of my time working on the project leading up to the night I know we're going to do the vote. And then my job is because for me, I feel like the persuasiveness with everybody watching is more powerful than a one-on-one conversation. So if I make my case that night, then I expect not just one or two to come my way. I want everyone to come my way.
Sure, of course, because we're positive people and we sell for a living.
That's
right.
But I mean, there's not like I'm laying out an argument. You don't see me doing it for the third or fourth time when I'm doing it in the meeting. That is me laying out my case. I haven't done it behind the scenes working.
I want to kind of play a little bit off of Jerry's comment and kind of dovetail for that. I think what Jerry is trying to suggest, and I tend to agree with him, is that it appears there are people of affluence that come out to oppose these projects. The people that are not of affluence.
I mean, cut to the chase. Glenmore is one of the deepest pocketed neighborhoods in Albemarle County.
It's up there. But the other side of the debate wasn't there. And the question I was trying to ask, because I didn't attend this or watch this one, and Neil, you can jump in from your perspective. Did it look like, because of one side coming up in the public comments, sway a vote one way or the other live during the meeting, or was that decision? Because I've seen that happen.
I mean, it may have. I
Yeah.
mean, I think a lot of supervisors go in and remain open. I've seen it too many times where you can see the persuasion go. It's like, oh, that was a new thought. And you can kind of see it. Neil used to probably be able to see that better when he was in watching live meetings. I think you can see the dynamic of the board a little differently than with the virtual.
I think,
but it's tough when you vote in opposition to whatever the highest or the most. So for the supervisors that voted for Rio Point, all of the public comment, or 90% of the public comment, was against that.
So
So it was hard to take that yes against that volume, but clearly they weren't persuaded by those 90% of voices.
So I'm going to bring it around to my jurisdiction, Fluvanna County. There was a project that was recently rejected for it. And my colleagues in the industry, people that I bump into every day at the food line at Lake Monticello, everybody says, well, why did that fail? And my answer is, were you at the meeting? Did you say, hey, I'd like this? You know,
Which goes to Neil's point that how can you be at the meeting if you don't have a chance to live in the area?
Well, I think that's too, but these were folks that were living in the area that felt that this should have gotten approved. Why didn't it get approved?
It's always easier to be in the opposition because you're standing in the way of something happening. I believe it's harder to be supportive of such things. And it's an important note that the Free Enterprise Forum isn't in favor or opposed to any project. It never has been. But this is talking about organizational dynamics and how the votes happen. Mm-hmm. And it is important that people understand how that happens. And, you know, I think that, and Ned has heard me say this before, and it has no way a negative connotation to the folks sitting on the dais. But if you have uncontested elections across 3 districts in a locality, you don't get the opportunity to, as Covey said, sharpen the saw. You don't get the opportunity to go and push against the ideas and make the ideas stronger.
So to put it in context back to my project that we're talking about in Fluvanna County, there was a dozen people that spoke to oppose it. On Sunday at Food Lion at 7:30 in the morning, I spoke to 24 people that said, geez, I would have supported that. I didn't know about it. And my answer is follow Neil, right? Follow Real Talk, you know, get engaged. And I'm just wondering how much the lack of input of the IMBYism versus the NIMBYism is having on these decision-making things. Just for a table of topic here.
Anyone want to touch that?
Well, I mean, I was frustrated a meeting or two ago where I said that, you know, we've spent a couple years talking about things at the board. We've pushed out through our own ways of trying to push out to the community. There's been press and news stories on it. And then we get the public comment and somebody says, you're doing this at the 11th hour.
Yeah.
And I'm like, come on.
And that is absolutely the case. I've seen it time and time again. And to my good friend Allison Rabel at the Progress.
Who's on vacation right now.
Indeed.
Clearing her inbox.
The idea that someone would get up and say, I never heard about any of this, when the local paper had run 8 stories on that issue. We are blessed to have a local paper. We are so blessed to have Sean Tubbs doing what he's doing in the community.
He's watching right now?
Well, then forget I said that. But the reality is you have to pay attention. And I think it was, it might have been Alex Erpe who said, you know, quite honestly, we get done with working and we want to get home and spend some time with our family. We don't really want to go to a 6 o'clock planning commission meeting or a board of supervisors meeting. That's our family time. And
I think he was referencing the Hispanic community there.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But that's not limited to that.
That's not limited to that.
That's a conversation
My point
I
is
have
that the you know, when you're raising kids, as you know, Jerry, and you're running to soccer games, you're getting them to practice, ballet recital, whatever it is, there's a lot to do in addition to your 40-hour job.
So that's the reason they should donate to you. That's because you're out there. They should follow it.
And they should be engaged in the community, because if they read Sean, they read the paper, subscribe to the paper.
But that's always been the case. The retired community is more actively engaged with local policy and politics because they have the time to be engaged. And the retired community, there's a direct correlation with retired in time and NIMBYism.
In Albemarle County,
We'll cut to the chase.
In Albemarle County, how many supervisors have a real job?
Supervisor Gallaway does.
Yep.
Is that a real job?
Is it a real job?
Okay.
Well, but let me.
Supervisor Andrews, is he semi-retired?
I honestly don't.
I don't know.
Let Ned jump in.
Okay.
He wanted to say something.
No, I was just, when I was on, you look, I've got 3 kids, and one has gone through the school system. And in 2009, I ran for the school board, and I lost. And then I was still in the meeting, sitting there listening to it. And I had a full-time job and a family and soccer practices and all that. But at the end of the day, one of the things that I said, whether I've been on the board or not on the board, is you have to learn how to listen to the conversations of the folks that you've elected. Because it's not the vote that's going to really be as telling, it's listening to them discuss it before they vote. And I would work real hard to try to show people, here's how you get to the electronic school board, here's how you listen to the podcast, here's how you listen to the video, here's how you can chime in from home, here's how you can do it if you missed the meeting and want to go catch up to it. But there has to be some level of engagement where you go, and it's on a priority list. And I'm not saying that it has to be on everybody's top 5, but wherever it falls for you, then you have to manage time to put that in. And I feel badly for folks that feel like they've been out of the loop or get caught off at the last minute, but there's not a lot of stuff that we just pop up and go, surprise, we're voting on
But you
this
can
today.
send an email, and people can be engaged by emails. People can be engaged by Facebook.
There's a lot of ways to be
posts and stuff like
engaged, but you have to be informed so that when you do engage, you don't get dismissed because you don't want somebody's first reaction who's making a decision going, what? Where have you been?
So depending, Jerry, do we have anything on the feed?
We have a lot on the
Okay,
feed.
because
Yeah,
I want
no,
to.
but please finish your thought.
I have
Yeah.
one off-the-wall question for Ned, if I might.
And then we got to get back to this uncontested election thing, because
Yes.
I want to make a comment about that.
But the question I had for you, Ned, was last week, an issue that really wasn't the purview of the Board of Supervisors ended up generating a Board of Supervisors letter that was signed by all the members of the board, but not in the capacity of the board. I've not seen that, as I recall, in 17 years. This was about Governor Youngkin's tip line. What prompted that letter, and what was behind that? Because it was so out of character for Albemarle County Board of Supervisors.
Well, I think you had 6 citizens that wanted to say something and were like-minded in what they wanted to say and got together and wrote a letter and did it.
Okay,
And it wasn't board business.
fair enough. I just wanted to give you the
Uncontested,
opportunity.
it's your turn, uncontested elections.
Well, no, I think, and I don't disagree with the statement, but when I was listening to Sean and Neil back during campaign time, I was getting a little fired up. I almost called in there and started content slinging myself from afar. But
Just content slinging, right?
just because an election is
Ned.
uncontested doesn't mean you can't have an exchange of ideas. But here's the reality of the situation. The media, everybody gets worked up when there's competition because they want the adversarial nature of it. And that's what generates interest to put out there. When Diantha and I came on this show, we were uncontested. It was during election time. I think you guys told us it was a well-watched show.
It was, yeah,
We
very
had
much
an
so.
exchange of ideas that day. And you got to learn about the candidates, right? So yes, it was uncontested and void of somebody sitting there disagreeing with me and watch us have a debate when it's adversarial disagreeing in nature. It was still insight for folks that are looking at Supervisor Gallaway. How does that guy think? What does he feel about issues, et cetera? And they learn about the person that's running.
Well,
Right,
that's,
and then they have the choice of voting for Ned Gallaway or
A write-in.
so first
There's
of all,
one in Albemarle County, as you know, a
right
write-in.
in South.
And we had one that raised $100,000 2 election cycles ago in a write-in. But what I'm saying is that, you know, the exchange of ideas, just because the competition isn't there, nobody calls me. When I'm in elected competitive races, I get a bunch of questionnaires to fill out. I get a bunch of invites to come out and have debates and town halls and conversations. When I'm not contested, I get very few.
no, you get to come on Real Talk and you have an hour and a half conversation, and that's the reason why we came up with this coffee with the candidates portion and migrated it into coffee with the stakeholders, which is what we're trying to do today. So, you know, through the reach of Jerry's network and I Love Charlottesville, we're able to reach a bunch of folks all over the place. But you had a couple of things on the feed.
Yeah,
before
well,
I
I mean,
went
I'm
into
going to
some-
paraphrase this one. I think, and I appreciate this one from the Samuel Miller District and Rebecca. And then Rebecca, I'm going to paraphrase what you're saying. What turns some folks off, we're not pointing fingers here. Supervisor Jim Andrews is on the board. Supervisor Andrews, and this is, you know, maybe me saying this here, was somewhat of an unknown commodity when he got on the board. And he won in uncontested election fashion. So what turns off some of the folks is Supervisor Andrews getting on the board without necessarily the deepest ties to the community. And here this guy is making decisions that determine the future of Albemarle County, and he's doing it as someone that a lot of folks didn't really know about, and he had a free pass green light to do this.
And that's why we brought him on the show, Real Talk, to have a conversation with him about
Is that what
it.
you're saying, Rebecca, here?
And we're going to bring him on again.
Yeah.
You know, I don't disagree with anything there, but the dynamics, as Neil knows, in the political cycle is that for a I'm certainly on my side not going to go out and do the work to get a contestant.
Well, of course not. Yeah, of course not. Yeah.
I mean, why the hell would I do that?
Yeah. You're in it to win. Yeah, and you're in it to
I'd love to
win.
help you, Neil, but
Yeah, he's in it to win.
Well, that's what's so great about this. We got two different opinions on it, and
And-
we're having an...
and I'd like to
beat
think
LaGusto
that
Kirtley. She won with 896 votes.
Yeah.
She beat Gerard Smith 896 to 757.
and then
I'm
she
looking
had
that
a
up
write-in
online.
that was well-funded there in the fall, so she
And she had ties to California, right? Very fresh to this area, Supervisor Kirtley.
So I'll speak again a little bit on different jurisdictions, not to name out candidates, not to name out jurisdictions, but there was a similar situations in other jurisdictions where it was uncontested. And that particular individual had a conversation with the flip side of it as somebody who's a voter. I'm asking this other person, this now Board of Supervisor, is do you understand the other side of the coin, right? And that particular individual, maybe not so much so. So we're helping him educate that, he or she, I should say, on that end of it. So the contested helps from a public perspective get both sides. There's a flip side to it also. You know, if you're doing some great work, first 4 years is really hard to get some stuff done. You know, the second 4 years, you know, you can get an agenda that you may have set up 4 years ago to move forward. You know, competition's a good thing. We do it every day, right? You and I do it every day.
what gets, I mean, as somebody that has been in a contested election and won and lost a few, the things that you typically, you know, they're big idea issue type things. And sometimes it's fascinating when you look back on it because it's like, will we even ever vote on that particular issue that we're debating
Sure.
in the fall?
Sure.
Whereas when you're on the, like this is the first time I've ever run for reelection. Constituent service, I think, goes a long way sometimes to deciding whether or not you're not for a new person, but for an incumbent. I think that folks will look at, regardless of your issues or your stances or certain votes you happen to take, there's a lot that supervisors do constituent service-wise to help people week in and week out. And I think that level of service sometimes drives,
And responsiveness.
and responsiveness drives whether or not it's like, all right, this Gallaway guy's clueless. You know?
Well, that's what we're doing here today, right? That's what we're doing on the show, trying to get a long-form format to get out. As Neil knows, I've lost before from run election. It hurts, and it gets a little personal. You know, from a person who has ran before, I would prefer not to run contested because they get a little personal and all that stuff. But
Well, if I run again and I don't have an opponent, then I want Neil and Sean to put a nice forum together, and they can take the opponent's stance, and I'll come out and do a debate with you.
We toyed with doing that, but the view of an empty chair next to Ned didn't make good policy.
But let's ask the bigger question: Why aren't people doing this?
We know why. I mean, how many times have we? I mean, okay, you. It's time consuming. It's less than $17K in pay if you're a supervisor. You are going to lose time away from your family. You are going to have a good portion of the community dislike everything that you do.
Absolutely.
You have to be well-resourced and cut to the chase. Have a job that offers you flexibility and freedom to do this.
Sure.
If you have young kids, you're going to get incredible resistance from your better half if you're choosing to pursue this, guy or gal.
You have to have a thick skin. 'cause
You have
it's
to have a
gonna-
thick
It's going
skin.
to get personal.
I mean, this ain't no easy task right here, to cut to the chase, right?
How many hours you put in?
I mean, this guy's grinding. You're grinding.
How many hours on your board?
I don't track it. You can't track it.
Well,
Why? Because it would be demoralizing?
Well, the thing
No,
of it,
it's just why I've decided to do this. I've been doing this in some
you love the
capacity
area.
for a long time.
well, I'll do it for you because I'm on the other side of a lot of stuff with you. You put in a full job on
Are you
your.
clocking 40 a week doing this?
No, not every week. There are weeks where I do, and there are weeks where I don't.
but the reality is, and this is true every elected official that I know and most appointed officials that I know, they come to the meetings prepared. They've read the material. They answer emails. They listen to their constituents. No one got into this business to do this poorly.
Right.
And they didn't get in the business to be rich. And I have an unbelievable amount of respect.
Or necessarily be popular.
I have an unbelievable amount of respect for people who serve. And that
Regardless
service,
of their position,
regardless of their positions, whether they're right or wrong.
Even if we vehemently disagree with them.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I think that folks need to recognize that when you send an email to Ned reads the email.
Yeah.
I mean, there's not a staff.
Except for this guy Smith, he never
So
responds to them.
Steve Harvey's watching. He's already run against Supervisor Malik, has indicated here in this network that he will do it again in 2023. And he says there will be a full Republican ticket running in 2023 for all open seats in the Board of Supervisors. Say that on air. Okay? So he's indicating that there will be contested elections in 2023.
So let's
Steve
go-
Harvey right there. Kyle Redinger's got comments for Supervisor Gallaway, but do you want to hit what Steve
Well,
Harvey just said?
Not particularly. That's a
Okay.
good thing. You know,
Yeah.
competition is good. We've said this before, and I think we've kind of beat that to death a little bit. I want to go back to the time commitment because, you know, the folks that are going to run for this position. So I won't put that. But other than the Board of Supervisors, how many bodies are you on? How many other organizations other than the Board of
You've
Supervisors?
asked me that before. I have to count them. I mean, the TJPDC board, the
RHP.
Regional Housing Partnership, the MPO.
That's
my,
three.
My RIO Citizen Advisory Committee.
4.
Those are the primary ones that meet regularly or monthly. I mean, I'm on the audit committee, but that's a couple times a year. I'll be on the
5.
CIP this year, so that'll be
6.
meetings in the fall. There's a couple others that you meet as needed, so it doesn't necessarily just meet.
It averages 9 commitments per supervisor because they have 6 supervisors. If there were 7, it
Yeah.
would be fewer commitments.
And those are all unpaid, uncompensated.
Oh, yeah, I mean, it's just part of
Yeah.
your.
So the point I'm trying to make is
The
this.
dude's grinding.
This isn't, you read a board, this isn't like with all due respect to CAR, Social Association Realtors, I read the board packet, a couple of days, I show up to the board, you know, we have discussion, we're done. I have a couple other committees I have to sit on, but it's not 9. So between your time of doing your job as a Board of Supervisor, whoever this person is, you're on at least 9 other bodies that you are working on. And if I added up the time, Mr. Galloway, I suspect you'll come up with a log.
On average.
Don't tell me.
Yeah.
What did Kyle have to say?
Question for Supervisor Ned Gallaway. What is being done about building permit backlog and review timelines getting longer? With construction costs rising 20+% year over year, it's endangering our ability and timeline to bring new apartments to the market and to pay a bigger profit to Albemarle County.
Yeah. I mean, this is right now, and I think I made this comment when Diantha and I, Supervisor McKeel and I were here, but this is on the board. This is squarely on the board when we froze positions when the pandemic hit, because there were positions in community development slated to go through in that budget that didn't because we froze those positions. Now, we did that. I think it was the right decision. I'm not going to say that I regret that. That was the right call to make. And I think our county executive has done a phenomenal job bringing us through the pandemic from a budget standpoint. So what are we going to do about it? Well, it's been mentioned a few times in meetings thus far. It'll be through this budget cycle. So when the county executive brings his budget forward, I think, like Kyle, should be looking squarely at what the staffing that will be suggested for the community development office, and that's the answer. Then the board has to go. Has what the county executive brought forward enough to get what we want done? And then we have to obviously approve it or change it, perhaps. I mean, what are your options? You cut it, you add to it, but you know, we'll have that conversation through the budget cycle.
Right, and what's happening, and to be fair, it is unacceptable building permits taking 4 months, which has happened.
Oh,
A
by
simple
the
building permit.
way, you COs. So that's only one half of it.
And the
back
COs,
end,
the
back end,
COs,
the certificate of
but
occupancy.
to be fair, the Board of Supervisors in Albemarle, mid-budget season, added a few line items to community development, which, by the way, generates revenue. And so it's important to recognize that they added 2 outsourced positions. The first week, those 2 plan reviewers reviewed 30 plans. 20 of those plans were approved, and 10 were sent back with additional questions. There is also a new software program that's coming forward, but the big kicker is we're still having issues with comments that don't even come back during the time frame necessary. They're required by law, and it holds up the entire idea of moving forward with the comprehensive plan ideals and with projects that have been approved. And that is something that the board, as it goes through the budget process, needs to assess. Are they spending money where there is an ROI in Jerry's world?
So I want to, this is, I've been meaning to segue into this one word, and you guys have been doing it for quite some time, budget. And there's a gentleman sitting at this table that said something to me a long time ago that's been stuck in my head. If you really want to know how a supervisor is going to vote on something, watch the budget process. The budget process, what we're currently going on right now, we might want to, for the listeners and the viewers, go through a quick overview.
In multiple jurisdictions.
In multiple jurisdictions. It's all our jurisdictions. It happens.
Kyle says thank you to Ned, to Supervisor Gallaway.
So let's talk a little bit about the budget process, where we are with that, and why is it so important to watch how that budget is put together.
Well, I mean, your priorities come through. Any given week, you can hear me get up and get on a soapbox and spout off about something that's important to me. Or a few weeks ago, I was complaining about the trees growing out of the storm drains at Rio 29. Now that's a weekly thing, right? But in terms of the big picture, the stuff that sometimes does come up in the campaign season and contested elections, or what are the big ideas or ways that you think that drive stuff, that's when your votes start saying, all right, are we going to staff another person in community development, or are we going to put that staff at that FTV in the fire department, or are we going to put it in Department of Social Services? That decision gives you an indication of what I prioritize. So, the county executive brings forward whatever his suggestion is, and then it's our job to take that and then scrutinize it. And if you went back over the last 4 budgets, maybe not the last 2 with the pandemic piece, but the first 2 budgets pre-pandemic, and you said, well, I want to know more about this Gallaway guy, go watch my conversations and what did I ask to have added into budgets, or did I say, let's pull back on that, or let's maneuver this,
Well,
that,
here's a prime example, right? You're in budget season right now. I'm going to do an ABC, always be closing. The land trust gets $240,000. I can put 12 houses up in it. Right now, I was actually talking to staff over there. You've got $30 million worth of affordable housing requests for less than $2 million you got in a pot at this point. So this is why it's so important to watch those discussions and take a look at them and how individual elected officials are moving money around. It tells you how they're going to vote later on down the road.
And frankly, what a supervisor's political ability is, because that's
Sure.
where you're coming out with an idea and you want to talk about how the 4 votes impacts like a rezoning, but you want to start talking about, I want to take $500,000 from there and put it over there, and now I got to get 3 people to come along with me to
Exactly
do that
right.
decision.
So the skill sets of being able to sell
Right.
is important.
But the beauty of the budget is that because it's all out there, it's easy it's frustrating when stuff comes to us out of budget cycle. Now, it wasn't frustrating this past year when we added the employment, the compensation, and we added those positions. It was needed. It was very clear that it had to be done at that time. And
But you
couldn't
also
wait
got
for
money
the
from the
budget.
feds for that too, right?
Well, it was.
No, we didn't.
We budgeted in a way not counting on that
Got it.
money
Right.
to begin with, so that when that money did come in,
Got it.
the stuff we put aside is now back, and
it.
plus revenues went up. I mean,
So that
good grief.
240's back in, right? No.
Huh?
only
Well,
kidding.
we'll see. But to your point, like if your 240's on the table and you want us to approve it, and then we've got all these other requests going on, that's what I mean. Watching a supervisor wrestle over, I can only pick 3 of these 20. And then the 3 that they pick and why, that right there is what's going to
Yeah,
tell
it's
So
a-
how does that work? So you've got 6 supervisors, each has their 3. Do you say, yo, Supervisor X, I'll support the fire station increase if you support my increase? Is that horse trading going on?
I mean, I think it has in public meetings before where we've done that. We have something called the parking lot. So when you go through the budget, if you've been like Neil paying attention, we're like, we'll put that in the parking lot. It's typically when an idea comes up that's not already on the table, like a supervisor goes, I'm interested in doing something with X. And we'll say, well, let's put that in the parking lot. So all these things will get in the parking lot. Then when you have to go to the lot and figure out how to deal with those, that's when a lot of that starts to happen.
There was a time, just as an aside, that politically correct wanted to change that to a bicycle rack. I remember that vividly. Sorry.
So pay attention during the budget. There's a lot of extra meetings, and Kyle should be paying attention to listen to us talk about the community development. But I think here's my optimism for the community development department, and maybe I might be out of turn, but I think I've said this already. When you think of the work plan, the Board of Supervisors talks about their work plan, and basically that is what the supervisors gives to staff to go to do, and we're great at adding to a list. We can just say, let's do this, let's do this, let's do this. But it takes staff time to accomplish that. So you're limited on what you can actually get done.
So how many times you do that, staff says, no, you can't do that?
Well, we have to do a lot of self-discipline. We have to go, wait, we can't keep adding, we need to do these things first. And that can get a little interesting when you've got...
And staff has said, that's fine, we'll do that.
But-
what comes off the list?
Right. So it's like in the budget. If I want to pay 500 grand for this over here, where am I going to find that?
So
500
not only are
grand?
you negotiating with your fellow board members, you also got the staff in the mix.
Well, staff isn't. We're not negotiating with
Offering
staff.
guidance.
We have to figure out what's the priority.
Yeah, but they're part of the discussion.
So my point being is that adding to community development, which will solve what Kyle and Neil were talking about, but that work plan also gets at some of the big strategic plan items that we have. So if we don't staff it right, then it gets in the way of achieving some of those really big strategic planning ideas.
Sure.
So, when I say watching the budget, if I'm saying, I want to do this big strategic plan item, but then I vote in the budget not to staff to be able to achieve that, then you've got me where you have to ask in a contested or uncontested election, you say this is important, but your vote went a different way.
So I got about a half a dozen budget notes, but let's stay on this budget conversation real quick.
There's a lot here on the budget, on the feed.
Before we do that, let's do a little education on it. Let's talk about what the CIP plan, the capital improvement plan is, and how it really impacts the budget, or vice versa. Because there's a little misconception going on. If a CIP plan is set up, everybody thinks that is like, it happens, but if it's not funded, it doesn't happen. So there's a bit of a debate going on there too, right?
I mean, and that's all, because that committee, like for those of it, like I've never actually been on the CIP committee before. So this year, that was one of my reasons where I said, I want to serve on that. I've never been on the CIP as a school board member or a supervisor.
How's that going?
To go through that. Well, I won't be on until the next
Got it.
cycle.
And
Because
the CIP covers those items that are capital items.
capital improvement projects.
So these are not operational items.
Usually the guarantees that will go through is your ongoing maintenance type stuff. So if you need a roof or you need a
Got it.
HVAC system, things like that have to go through, or you're not taking care of your
Current assets.
Your current assets. So, fire trucks are in there. I mean, stuff like that is
Yeah,
going
so
to
it's
be
like your house budget, right?
So a new elementary school.
Right.
So that's where right now the school board's long-range planning advisory committee focuses on the school's capital improvement projects, and then the local government side focuses on the counties. They get together, they've got both representatives in the CIP committee, and you start to figure out what the list is going to be, and then that'll come to the board to decide, do we like the prioritization of the list, and how much are we going to fund? And then
And there's another dynamic we've got going on here because of our state. Not only are you having this discussion amongst your board, you also got school board.
Both local government and the schools, there have been some years we've gone into May not knowing what the hell the state's going to do, and how that ends up impacting.
Why is that important?
Well, for the school division, if they don't fund a certain level, then it presents a gap to them, and then the locality either has to choose whether they're going to make it up or not. If they don't make it up, then the school division has to go back and figure out where the cuts were.
So how much of the school board is state money, typically,
It's
percentage-wise?
80 some.
But that's for the operations. Operations.
Not the CIP, not the capital
The feds,
improvement.
it's a small part, and then obviously what you get from the state and then locality or.
So a lot of folks don't know that. Almost 80% of that operational school budget.
That being said, 60% of Albemarle County's budget goes generally to the schools.
Yep.
Katie Pearl, she's a realtor, Keller Williams. I would love to see a young mother on the board to represent the voice of so many of us, but we quite frankly do not have the time to do this. Good perspective from her. Steve, we'll get to your comment. How about this comment, though, from Grayson, who is in the Mill Creek area. Will the county be influenced by, and we thought this question was coming, by the tax rate increase in the city in any way?
Well, I mean, what the city does with their tax rate is based on their indicators, and it's not like we're going, oh, let's see what they're going to do over there. So for me as a supervisor, no. What the city decides to do with their tax rate is immaterial to what we're going to decide to do with our budget, or what I'm going to do.
And I think that's fair, but I think it's also fair to recognize that as Albemarle County urbanizes, more citizens are expecting, there's an expectation of increased services in that urban areas to support that urbanization. We call that a concurrence of infrastructure, which hasn't occurred, which was always promised in the DISC 2 process, was a concurrency of infrastructure. And so you have neighborhoods coming forward saying, look, those sidewalks that I wanted aren't here, and they were supposed to be. And we're an urban county, and we're an affluent urban county, we should have it. And so there's always those cost pressures that come forward when you look at
That's
Albemarle being urban and rural.
But doesn't a revenue sharing agreement have some impact on this?
But I mean,
It just takes money out of the Albemarle County budget and puts it in Charlottesville.
Got it.
and then the state acts like it's still in our coffers when
Yes,
they do their
and
formulas,
when they do the calculations.
which is awesome. So,
But why is that comment important? Because folks should understand.
because its ability to pay, and if the money's not in our coffers, but you do a formula saying it is, then they don't send as much support down. So this can really have an impact on your school system.
That's exactly the reason I brought it up.
But if it was carved out and said, well, since that money goes over here and is not in your coffers, then your ability to pay goes down, and then your support can come
And the
up.
state will say that that was a separate contract between two willing parties, that
Not
the
our
state
problem.
is that's not our problem.
And in fiscal year 2020, we're talking over $14 million there. So that's a substantial
Which is
amount of money
down,
right
and
there.
it's actually been declining.
Yes, it's
Yeah.
down, it's down from almost 20.
And I have the table. In fiscal year 2010, which you commented on, it went from 18.4 to fiscal year 2020, 14.2. So that's a hell of a decline there.
Now, but to the original point of does what the city decide to do, at the end of the day, yes, we have an urbanizing county, we have to provide the services that are expected for those areas, but how do you work through that conversation? Well, you decide what your tax rate's going to be. You prioritize everything up against everything else and go, how are we going to get at this? And what the city does or doesn't do doesn't impact that decision.
So Neil and Jerry would probably know the answer to this. The city of Charlottesville, does it have a surplus?
City of Charlottesville has run a surplus the last 3 years.
Does Albemarle County have a surplus?
Albemarle County has run a surplus. That's not necessarily a bad thing. It depends what you do with the surplus.
That's
Most
my next
times,
question.
it's rolled into capital, so that you could pay cash instead of financing it. But the idea of conservatively budgeting is not a bad practice in government or private business.
The follow-up on the tax rate increase is associated with the meals tax. It seems like the county is looking to equalize the meals tax rate with the city, so why wouldn't they do the same with the real estate tax rate increase?
Well, a meals tax and the transient occupancy tax, different from your property tax. Your property tax is definitely all of your citizens. Now, I'm not saying our citizens don't go out and eat meals and do things like that. But the folks that come to this area but don't live here, they come here to spend time, to use our infrastructure, to enjoy a weekend, to do different things. Those are the folks you're capturing some tax from them by having them in the meals and the transient occupancy.
So that's why I've always say what happens in Charlottesville and Albemarle impacts Savannah County, because frankly, we eat in Albemarle County and Charlottesville, so my meals tax dollars are going here instead of my county.
And you can throw the cigarette tax in there too. If you have counties.
Well, none of us here smoke.
And
so
we've
we're
got a
not-
regional cigarette tax, and if you can at least stabilize it, you can at least stop this kind of swirl from happening.
But you're right, the meals tax specifically, and it's been brought up that if you get a rotisserie chicken from the grocery store, you're subject to meals tax. The meals tax is paid by everyone. The one thing that people forget is that property taxes are paid from everyone. People always say, well, the property owner should really be worried about this. No, everyone should be worried. If you're a commercial owner and your property taxes go up, your prices go up. Businesses do not pay taxes, they collect taxes. And it's just that simple. And individuals that rent will see increases in their leases based upon the property taxes pushed onto them by government.
Which is a follow-up to yesterday's interview with Monique of the Happy Cook, and how she said that the assessments going up in the city of Charlottesville on Barracks Road directly impacted her bottom line as a retailer at the Happy Cook. Now, you responded on the feed saying that it's the customers that are going to feel this burden and not necessarily Monique, which is what you're saying right now, because that additional overhead's just going to be passed to the customers. to
Eventually.
pay. Eventually.
Well, yes and no, right? Or
And that was my disagreement with Sir Neil Williamson there.
well, let me try it a different way. Maybe yes, maybe no, yes, because now I'm not going to go to Happy Cook and buy.
Well, there's a price point pressure that if you surpass a certain threshold, you're going to lose customer base.
I understand there's going to be space available in Stonefield, and that would bring somebody from Charlottesville into the Albemarle County role.
Yeah, and how much is Snowfield?
Williams-Sonoma went out of closed. He's right. He's right.
I get that, but at what price per square foot?
Right. Everything relates to everything, but taxes, generally speaking, are not paid by businesses. They're collected by businesses.
Joanne Mackey, Queen of Keswick, for Supervisor Ned Gallaway. What about the surplus? $12 million. Why the rush to spend it and not distribute it to areas that may not require such an increase in the tax rate at Albemarle?
So the current surplus is different than what we've had and run in the past. The surplus that earlier when I talked about freezing positions, and I mean, we put a hold on things. We went back to the table and said, whoa, we don't know what's going to happen with this pandemic. We're seeing restaurants close, revenue generating stuff that we projected was going to be a vast difference. So we pulled back and said, all right, we got to do some pretty drastic things to make sure we're prepared to get through this. We didn't know federal money was going to come down. We didn't know this ARPA money was coming or any of that. So you can't expect it. So you have to budget in a way to do that. So we did that. And now we didn't know property assessments were going to go sky high. The economy actually boomed in some ways through the pandemic. I mean, I had an unbelievable year selling cars
So did
in
he,
that first year.
so did us.
So it's like none
It's
of that
okay.
was anticipated.
He did too.
It's okay.
So we took a very methodical approach and we said we'll do a 366 and we're going to stick to our approach. But when the ARPA money and the federal money started coming in, and it did have rules that you had to follow of where it could go, as soon as you could program that money in, now you can unlock the money that was there that the locality kind of put
To
up.
explain
She
what the
says great
336.
response to Ned.
The 336 was a 3-month budget, a 3-month budget, and then a 6-month budget, right?
366.
366.
Because we were 3 months from the end of the fiscal year when the pandemic
Right.
hit, and
Sorry.
then we were going to do a 6 on the first year and another 6 on the
So,
next year.
so just wanted to clarify.
So,
what-
Yeah,
so
yeah.
let me try the question a different way, right? Just from my
Well,
vernacular.
to finish the point,
Sure.
so now we've got monies and revenues that we weren't projecting in the last budget cycle. So that's when the board looked at some things and said it's important to do some stuff. We as an employer needed to right size our compensation so
Sure.
we don't lose our people. And then we added the positions in that we added, and we did that off budget cycle from this money that was protected and locked away because we were able to use ARPA and federal dollars, relief dollars to plug that in. That doesn't happen year in and year out.
Yeah.
Do we have surpluses? Sure, because of what Neil said. We're going to approach something and go, you want to end the year with more and not less. You don't want the alternative.
And this is a unique year, and I agree 100%. You got a little extra money than you normally would have, but to go back to Neil's comment, normally that, and I think this was the comment from the viewer, that instead of
And she's an economist.
So instead of putting it to a CIP budget, right, we talk about this all the time. This budget process is a three-sided triangle, right? You've got the assessment, you got the budget, and you got the rate, right? And at the end of the day, it's got to equal zero. It's got to balance out. So would it be possible, or could you support taking some of that money instead of going to CIP to go to the budget to keep at least revenue neutral?
You wouldn't take surplus.
Can you do that?
You wouldn't take surplus money and put it to anything that's an ongoing operating
Got it.
expense.
So you can't do that.
So you could, but it wouldn't be wise.
But it wouldn't be wise, is
Got
the
it.
point. The point being, you wouldn't want to create a new position and fund it with surplus dollars that may or may not be there
The next year.
the next year.
No, I get all that. The positions are full, we're done, we've got X dollars left over, right? Instead of taking X dollars over and putting it to the CIP, and you need $4 million in the
So
budget. to-
earlier, when we talked about watching the supervisors when they do the budget, where
That's the
that's
reason
how
I'm bringing
that
it back up.
surplus money gets programmed, we make those decisions. So what were some of the pre-pandemic decisions for surplus money? We put money into a housing fund. We put money into an economic development fund.
I'm raising my hand for that again.
So we have taken money and we put
They
it,
gave
we
money to the
created.
CACs to spend wherever they wanted, which
Well,
are
that
unelected
was-
bodies.
That was a while ago.
Sorry, it was a dig
Not
that needed to be
I'm
made.
talking about the budgets I've been in. I don't think we've done that since I've been on the board. But we created a board strategic reserve fund that's specific to. So that was a new reserve fund that didn't exist.
So
and we
talk
put
about that for
in.
a second, because the board can determine on its own how to spend that money.
That money
correct?
is for the board to be used to achieve strategic plan items.
And how much money is
So it was in the 3 million range.
It's about that, yeah.
So what I'm
This is the
saying
time
is
for me
that
to make-
year, and I was a supporter of doing that, is saying, well, let's put this over here, because if we get, and I think ultimately the Road Corridor study for the consultant
it
study.
was.
So that wasn't in the work plan initially. So it was like, well, let's take some money from there and let's get a consultant, let's get that done. And that allowed us to do it with some speed. If we waited and it went through the process, I don't know if that even
be
is in the
started yet.
process yet.
I would say that, so you're going to like this comment here. This guy is good, just talking about you, Ned. This guy is good and he's smart, and it really answered my question because I thought mismanagement created the surplus. This has been very good. I would venture to say, and this is maybe unfortunate, that Real Talk is putting Supervisor Gallaway in a even more human perspective, answering questions from constituents than on the dais itself. Just putting that out there.
Well, they don't let me talk this long when I'm on
Well,
the diet.
and this is also on every social media platform possible, where the meetings are a little bit more siloed.
They're very much so siloed.
Yeah, very much more siloed. So you're seeing the constituents engaged. Vanessa, I'm going to get to here. We have a hell of a lot of comments here, and it's 11:45. Can we go up tempo on some comments to get to some of the questions here, or are you on a time constraint? Are you on a time?
I'm good today.
I'm good today.
Okay,
Keith, I
so
don't know.
multiple.
Well-
I know you're good today. I know you're good today. Multiple.
Hold it. Have you been looking at my
I
calendar
know.
again?
I just know how much you enjoy this, and I want to
Well,
go.
I just.
I mean, I planned for 12, so I thought.
Yeah,
last
well,
time I was
I'm
here
just-
We got 60 minutes here.
Okay,
Yeah.
rock on with the comments.
Okay, so multiple people are asking Supervisor Gallaway and Sir Neil Williamson about Michael Payne's concept of the pilot program with the University of Virginia and an increased, Neil, Keith just did, I have a breath right there, and the University of Virginia contributing more from a tax standpoint associated with real estate holdings to both jurisdictions, Albemarle and City of Charlottesville. Because what ended up happening, and I'm going to get out of your way, I think a lot of people were startled when an elected official and Michael Payne puts on his Facebook page and then comes on this show in front of a hell of a lot of people and writes this. I'm going to read it verbatim to you guys and then get out of your way. Here it is. We could solve this budget situation in the city of Charlottesville with two new sources of revenue: the sales tax from the state, which would provide $12 billion directly to school buildings, and or UVA starting a payment in lieu of taxes pilot program, which could bring in $9 million additionally a year. UVA is paying $33,000 now. So $33K versus $9 million. That's gaining traction.
So the
with
1
community.
cent, the 1 cent piece for the schools, I know that I wrote a letter and other supervisors did supporting the state to do that. Because basically what that allows you to do by referendum is go to your voters, do you want 1 cent to specifically go to school projects? And that, why wouldn't you? But that didn't
Because
get
it's a
anywhere.
regressive tax and it overtaxes those that can least
Well, I
afford
mean,
it, but.
why would
other
you
than
let
that-
your local citizens
but
decide what that full
that's exactly
comment
right.
was?
So
Right.
to be clear, referendum means we're going to put it out, and you either vote yes or you vote no.
Right.
And that, now, honestly, the pilot program is one that I've seen starting to pop up in the news, and I'll have to get better educated on. I know that in the county, what we, in fact, some of that conversation was happening before we got started today, but what what we collect, it is two different animals, I believe.
Well, most of-
The point or the logic behind it, I don't think is different, but the numbers are different for the county
Well,
versus.
most
the
of
city.
UVA's in Albemarle County anyway.
But the other thing that complicates matter is UVA has one tax designation and the UVA Foundation has another.
That's exactly right.
And based on what we're looking at, the UVA Foundation, not UVA, but the UVA Foundation pays close to $400,000 in property taxes in the city of Charlottesville. That's based on some numbers that I looked at since Michael put out his piece. And so I think you need to consider that in the overarching piece. Now, that doesn't include those parts of grounds that are dedicated to the educational mission that are deeded to the rector. And so I think that the idea of a pilot, we've seen it happen in other jurisdictions that have town and gown situations, and many of those pay.
You reference Harvard. Yesterday on the show.
Many of those pay 50% of the property taxes on their land. Boston, where Harvard is, and by the way, there's about 17 schools in Boston. Now that my daughter lives there, I've walked past them, many of them.
In 1 square mile.
In 1 square mile, but the idea of recouping that as a percentage, and maybe it's a percentage that grows over time, is a worthy discussion to have.
So how does that happen? How does it go from this conversation to
Well, Councilor Payne said it's awareness amongst the community, creating momentum of the community speaking up, which pressures the university to do this.
I get that, but what is the actual mechanism to make that happen?
The reality is the university has the status to not pay taxes. Most universities have that status, is my understanding. Most state universities. What has to happen would be not the community standing up, but a conversation between the localities and the community and how this could work and where that money comes from. Because right now, because of efforts from some, there's a significant effort moving forward by the university to help address the regional affordable housing crisis. Those dollars are being spent to generate land in most cases, but to generate in all cases.
To be clear, it's not dollars. They're only donating land to the process.
And when you can't build without land.
Exactly right.
So that land has a price on it. If it was sold, it would have value.
Sure.
At least that's what I heard from the real estate show, that real estate has value. But it is a concept that can be come to, and usually it's almost it's not a law, it is an understanding between the university that's involved, be it Harvard, be it the University of Michigan. Some of the land trusts that I looked at now 10 years ago were in California.
Sure.
Because again, you had land that was owned by the university, wasn't being used effectively by the university for their mission, and they were willing to turn it over on a 99-year lease. So those conversations, I think, can happen with a forward-thinking localities and forward-thinking university provost and president.
So it sounds like this is a potential for the Regional Housing Partnership, because we have all the elected officials at the table, plus UVA. This might be a topic to pick up.
Well, they would definitely have, if UVA would have to contend with both localities for this to go forward. It's not like they would just siphon off and do one thing with the city or do it, I guess that's doable.
Well, if the city pushes it, you're basically saying the county would want their piece too.
And don't forget, they would probably be looking at WISE as well.
Yeah, and I don't know what the county would, because this has not been discussed or come up. Like I said, I'm just myself getting educated on it. And happy to say it that way. It did come up last night because of the foundation property is paying taxes. And last night, the North Fork
Correct.
piece was doing its presentation at the Rio North
But that's
CAC.
separate. That is separate from.
But the question came up about, well, how does the taxing work? So, like the development they brought up, if an apartment complex goes in or a multi-use building goes in, they're still paying taxes. If education-related building goes up, that building or that piece that's on, that would be different than what the rest of it would be.
Well, to Neil's point, if it is part of the university, they have the right not to pay taxes.
Yeah.
On that, because it's state property.
Right.
More comments?
Yeah.
Anything else on this topic? Queen of Earlysville, Vanessa Parkhill, has this. And Vanessa, we appreciate your contribution. Stonefield is not the only property with available retail space in Albemarle County. Albemarle Square and Hollymead Town Center have open spots, including former TGI Fridays and Panera locations. With the ongoing development along the 29 North Corridor, this should still be prime real estate for businesses looking to escape the city's crushing tax rate.
I may be remembering this wrong, but I believe the TGI Fridays is about to convert.
It is.
I saw something at the ARB about that. And that kind of creative destruction is anticipated and is an important part. I'm really surprised that I didn't get the FSM question, because that is the one that I continually hear. And I have a running joke, what day of the week will it be when somebody asks me about Fashion Square Mall?
Well, I
can ask it if you want me to.
No, I'm good.
why do you think, Neil, that those are not filling up the way they, is it just the cost? Is it?
Because no one knows the future of brick and mortar retail.
Brick and mortar retail is in an unusual position right now.
It's in purgatory.
But There are folks that are creating pop-up rental opportunities to test the market. Proof of concept, I think is what you...
Pop.
Yeah.
And there are landlords that are creating opportunities to do that on a short-term lease. You're going to see some things go in and not work. That's okay. That's part of it.
Yeah.
But I think that there is a significant question about bricks and mortar retail. And I think your interview yesterday with the Happy Cook was a good example of how much they're doing online.
Yeah, she said she's crushing it.
And as well as selling, I had no idea, selling cooking classes that they've recorded in Europe.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm curious of the tax base with those commodities and where that's going. You wonder about that?
I know that every business has to deal with what they generate and the taxes on it and the net for the landlords. All of that is part of the business equation. And I have yet to meet a business person that isn't optimistic, because you have to be optimistic to be in business.
Look,
Fair.
Retail-
Scott Elliff's got comments for Supervisor Gallaway. But go ahead.
No, please, go, finish comments.
So, Scott Elliff led the RST charge, Forest Lakes and Holly Mead. Sounds like you got a fair amount of the owners in that association watching. Sadly, we're disappointed at inability of the board to just say no. Slowly killing the place, got to use more long-run vision. Developers like 2-year-olds know that if they just keep pushing and fussing, maybe make minor tweaks, they will eventually get a yes. And then other members are making the comparison to what happened with Breezy Hill and Glenmore, currently on the feed.
Well, applications are going to come before us. I hope that by the time it's over, whether my vote's a yes or a no, that I state why I'm voting that way, and I stand by my votes.
Yeah, that's fair. That's a very fair response.
And it's important to recognize that some of the applications change dramatically from where they are at a pre-app to where they are at the final vote.
Why
And
is that?
Because what you see is you find at different stages of the approval process, there's a pushback on whether it's a open space requirement or a level of density requirement. But when proposals come forward, they may have X density, and when they actually get approved, they end up with Y. And you can take a look at the density deferred, density denied report at freeenterpriseforum.org for 3 recent examples.
Very nice. Very nice.
Content slinger.
Yeah, I love it. I absolutely love it. Steve for the panel. Harvey, running the Whitehall district. Supervisor Gallaway seems unhappy about the RSA. What are his plans to fix this thing if he is unhappy about it?
RSA?
RSA, more info, Steve Harvey, on that, if you could. Do you know what he's alluding to?
Ravenna
Supervisor
Service
Gallaway?
Authority, maybe? No?
That would be our WSA or our SWA.
Offer some more perspective. Okay, he's chiming in now as we speak.
Well, while he's doing that, I'll take a
Rev
step.
share.
Revenue sharing
share.
agreement.
Got
What's the question?
It is, are you
unhappy with the revenue sharing agreement?
Well, I've been on the I've gone down and back when I was on a school board and went down advocating for the state to take the revenue sharing agreement into account for the composite index calculations. So that's the comments I made earlier speak to that, and my position hasn't changed.
So the reason the composite index is so important, it's the amount of money you get from the state for the schools.
That's right. The school division, they're counting that revenue sharing dollars in our coffers when they figure out our ability to pay. And my stance, my view at the time was, since that money is not in our coffers, it goes to the city.
So is that
our
maybe why
ability,
60% of your budget's going to the schools because of that?
No, the
miscalculation?
60-40 is a different
Got
animal.
it.
So the revenue sharing is separate from
Got it.
that. But when the state looks at your ability to pay, now there's other things besides the money that leaves. There's land and easements and conservation easements that are counted in our ability to pay.
And to be fair, when the revenue sharing agreement was before public hearing, the very first speaker against the revenue sharing agreement called out that this agreement recognized the taxed value of land and land use at full value. So it wasn't as though the supervisors that agreed to the deal weren't aware of it. It was very clear they were aware of it. At the time, it seemed like this was a very reasonable solution, because people say, well, why'd you make it a deal that was forever? Well, the other flip was that annexation is forever too.
Yeah, so there's components there earlier that I spoke to that are about the composite index piece that, that's what I was alluding to when the revenue sharing piece came up.
We're not going to get to all these comments. I hate to say this. We have 3.5 minutes left on this program, and we're mindful of everybody's time. The revenue sharing agreement is too deep of a topic to continue unpacking here. Wouldn't you say in 2.5 minutes?
Yes, but I'll
And it's blowing up right now.
yeah. So
I mean,
Boy, you want to get, I believe that.
Yeah,
Just say it, it'll get everybody
yeah,
fired
dude,
up.
this is blowing up right now. I can't get to this.
I will tell you, read the hindsight report under reports tab at freeenterpriseforum.org. You'll see a really interesting, it's about 3 years old now, but a very interesting dynamic of what was the real costs and benefits of the revenue sharing agreement.
Yeah, yeah. And you offer great perspective on this. This is coming on your take on universities in Boston. Most of the universities mentioned in Boston are private, so I would assume they are paying into the tax coffer. Here we have a state university, tax exempt, that is a major presence and landowner in Charlottesville and Albemarle County. So the taxes are not being paid by UVA would have more of an impact than a state school in Boston, which may be just one, I'm not sure. This is a lot of, she's basically saying there's no better pressure than the media to get this revenue to come from the university.
yeah.
on
So
this.
then, what does that do to tuition? To play
I mean,
the
it would
flip-
raise it.
They have to play the flip
It
side.
would
of
raise it.
which is super expensive now, and we talk about it on Real Talk all the time about how student debt is impacting the real estate market. But by the count of the calendar of the clock, we got less than a couple minutes.
We got 90
left.
seconds here. We got 12 o'clock.
So, gentlemen,
Do you know what's going on at TGA Fridays? Everybody is asking right now.
I do, but I've forgotten. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I've tweeted about it from an ARB meeting about a month ago, but I don't remember.
See if I can find it real quick.
So, by the feed, by the comments from Jerry, by the comments from you guys, thank you very much for doing this. This is going to be repeated. Please, we want to bring you guys back, bring in different elected officials. But this is what this is what our goal was for on Fridays with these coffee with end
Dude,
of
it
it.
crushed it.
And please come back. And we'll schedule. Ned, you willing to do that?
Well, the coffee was good. Where was that from again?
Shenandoah Joe.
Yeah.
Well done.
We love Dave.
Well
Do
done.
they have a location in Albemarle County?
Well done.
Happy to come back.
Well done.
You were very good in this setting, Supervisor Gallaway. Very likable. Very
I
likable.
appreciate that Neil I was looking forward to it. I mean, this type of thing doesn't get to happen very often, and I really appreciate there are, for those out there, when we were talking about paying attention to what local government's doing, you have to give a shout out to Neil, you have to give a shout out to Allison Rabel, and you have to give a shout out to Sean Tubbs, and then Allison's partner over following the school division,
Catherine
Knott. So those are, and I'm calling them out because since my time being involved, whether
plug
on
them,
the
saying
board
you're
or
giving them
not,
props.
they have been engaged, they pay attention to everything, and if you're following any of their feeds, you're going to be a well-informed person.
This is why I wanted to do this, because generally you're at the dais, you're at the podium, you have 3 minutes or 5 minutes, depending on the jurisdiction, not, my God, an hour and 45 minutes or something.
Well, and he can go long, and
Yeah.
it's like not going to get taken out of context, and
That's
it's
exactly
a safe
right.
setting,
That's exactly right.
and it's on social.
It's on
It's
social.
everywhere.
On LinkedIn now, which is amazing.
We're streaming to half the community on LinkedIn here. Any closing thoughts, fellas? Neil, do you want to offer? Let's go Free Enterprise Forum. Live.
I am thrilled anytime to sit down with Ned or other elected officials. The reality is the elected officials want to hear from you. They don't hear from enough folks.
Agreed.
Feel free to write emails, to call. They need to be told what you're thinking. They can't read your mind.
Keith.
I would like to have Ned to wrap up.
I encourage other electeds to come do this, because this is a conversation that we don't get to have, and I think it's a window. I think in this day and age, when I think back to town halls that I've held with even another supervisor, and you might get 2 or 4 or 6 people to come out. I think this is a way to be able to share the ideas that we think the town halls can do. So thrilled to be here and grateful to Neil for paying attention, but also being here to have some conversation.
Thank you, gentlemen.
That's the show, guys. One programming note, Mayor Snook will join us Monday instead of today to follow up on the discussion from yesterday with Councilor Payne on the budget. Ned Gallaway is A+ people. and just absolutely great in this setting. Neil Williamson's contribution is phenomenal. Check out Free Enterprise Forum, and please, and thank you to Judah.
Oh, yeah.
Judah, seriously, thank you, because I know we just put you up
The
against the
brains.
gun here with 28 minutes left before our next show. Hasta luego, guys. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you,
Thank you,
everybody.
guys.